Today's lesson is 2-4, solving equations with variables on both sides. Our objectives for today, or our I can statements, are to create an equation with variables on both sides and use it to solve a problem. The next objective is to solve a linear equation with variables on both sides.
All right, for our first example, we're going to incorporate the things that you went over last night with translations, and we're going to create an algebraic sentence from this verbal sentence. It says here, 4 times Greg's age decreased by 3 is equal to 3 times Greg's age increased by 7. How old is Greg? Take a moment, pause the video, and get this written down. Okay, we're going to break this down step by step just like we did last night, but this is adding an extra step to it in that it's asking us to find how old Greg is. So we're going to actually have to solve for G. We're going to use G to represent Greg's age here. 4 times Greg's age we're going to show by saying 4G decreased by 3 means minus 3 is equal to, there's our equal sign, 3 times Greg's age, so that would be 3G, increased by 7, we're adding 7. How old is Greg? In order to find out how old Greg is, we have to solve for G. So we write out our algebraic sentence, subtract 3G from both sides. G minus 3 equals 7. We have to add 3 to both sides. And we find that G equals 10. We will be doing several more of these problems in this PowerPoint. Go ahead and get this example down. This should be the number 1 here, so ignore that. We renumbered that, and I'm sorry, but this is still number 1. Don't let that throw you. It's still number 1. And go ahead and get this down. You can pause the video now if you need to. Make sure you have both done before you move on to the next stage. And ultimately, your answer there is that Greg is 10 years old. Make sure you have that down as well.
Alright, so we have gotten our first objective. We created an equation with variables on both sides and we used it to solve the problem. The next one is we're going to actually just solve linear equations with variables on both sides. We're not going to create them anymore, we're just going to solve them. This is your step-by-step guide. If you'll follow each one of these steps on each one of the problems that we're going to go over today, you'll be able to get to your answer. Take a minute and write down these steps so that you have them. The first step is parentheses. You're going to ask yourself, is there any parentheses in the equation? If there is parentheses, then you're going to distribute the number in front of those parentheses. The next step is to look for like terms on the same side. So you're going to look at the left-hand side of the equation or the left-hand side of the equal sign and see if there's any like terms there. And if there are, you're going to combine them together. Then you're going to look at the right-hand side of the equal sign or the right-hand side of the equation, and you're going to look and see, is there any like terms on that side that I can put together? And if so, you're going to go ahead and combine those. The third step is, are there variables on both sides? So if you have a variable of x, is there an x on both sides of the equal sign? If there is, you're going to take the one on the right and move it to the left. Then you're going to add or subtract, and then you're going to multiply or divide. So that's your step-by-step guide on how to solve equations.
All right, for our first example, you'll have to bear with me. I'm using a new pen here. Write down the problem. This is number 2. N minus 18 equals 4n minus 3. The very first thing we're going to do here is we're going to come into the problem and we're going to fix it so that it is, maybe my pen's not working, hold on, I'm trying. All right, We're going to fix it so that it's a little bit easier to work in a couple of ways. First thing I want you to do is put a 1 in front of this n. The next thing you're going to do is add the opposite and change this to a plus sign and make this, oh, it's still going, and make this a negative 18. Yeah, I'm going to have to do this on the board. It's going to drive me crazy. All right, pause, hold on a second. Okay, so back to where we were. Let's try that one more time. I'm going to put a 1 in front of this n, and then I'm going to add the opposite here with, apparently it's not just this, I'm going to add the opposite here with my negative 18. And then I'm going to add the opposite as well over here with my 3. All right. The first thing we need to realize is that we have a goal, and that is to get our n by itself. We are solving for n here. We went over the steps with you. We don't have any parentheses in this problem. We don't have any like terms on this side of the equal sign, and we don't have any like terms on this side of the equal sign, but we do have like terms in our problem. We have variables on both sides, and that is our next step. So we have to pick a side. We have to get our variables to be together. We can put them on the left, or we can put them on the right, but we have to pick a side and get them to be together. For the purpose of this problem, we're going to get our variables over to the left. So we have a positive 4n here, and we have to do the opposite of 4n, positive 4n, to get it to move to the other side. So we're going to subtract 4n because subtracting is the opposite of adding. And because we did it on that side, we have to do it on this side. Anything we do on one side of a problem, we have to do on the other side of the problem. This 4n minus 4n, that's one of those zero pair things. That cancels out. That's why we did that, to make that equal 0. So we just cross it out. We're done with that. Over here, we have 1n minus 4n. 1 minus 4 is negative 3. Negative 3n. Then we have plus a negative 18. And then we have our minus 3 still over here by itself. All right, now going back to our steps, we no longer have variables on both sides, but we do have addition and subtraction. So we have to get our n by itself. The first thing we need to do is get rid of this negative 18 on this side of the problem, and we have to move it over to the other side. We have to make it equal 0. We're going to do that by adding 18 on both sides. That cancels out. And on this side, we have negative 3 plus 18. Negative 3 plus 18 equals 15. It's positive 15. So I'm going to bring down my negative 3n and bring down my equal sign. Now I have negative 3n equals 15. I'm not done yet because my n is still not by itself. Even though there's nothing else on this side of the problem, I still have a negative 3 here in front of this. I have to get rid of that. This is being multiplied because I have a letter and a number that are touching. I know anytime a number touches a variable, it's being multiplied. And I have to divide to undo that multiplication. So I'm going to divide by negative 3. And because I did it on this side, I have to do it as well on this side. So I have to divide this side by negative 3. These negative 3's cancel because that equals 1, and I'm left with n. On this side, 15 divided by negative 3 is going to be negative 5. So n is equal to negative 5. Make sure that you have this work copied down before you move on. All right, with all of these problems today, you have got to check your work. From this point forward, we will talk a lot about how you have to check your work. So this over here is nothing more than all of the work that we just did. We've already done that. It's just in type now instead of handwriting. On the other side here, we have to check. We think that n equals negative 5, but we have to go back to our original problem over here and plug this in. So everywhere you have an n, we're going to put in parentheses. We have parentheses minus 18 equals 4 parentheses minus 3. Because every time we have an n over here, we're putting in parentheses over here. Now what goes in that parentheses is whatever we think n is equal to, which in this case, we think it's -5. And now we just work out the problem. You have, if you want to draw a line for your equal sign so you don't start getting confused about what goes where, you can do that. You have -5 minus 18. That equals -23. -5 minus 18 equals -23. Over here we have 4 times 5. 4 times -5, which equals -20. And then we have minus 3. -20 minus 3 equals -23. So what we're left with here is that -23 equals -23. And we call that correct. It's equal. The problem checks out. Make sure that you have this work down on your paper before you move on to the next problem.
Alright, number 3 says 3y minus 2.4 equals -2y plus 7.1. Don't let the decimals mess you up here. They're not any different than any other numbers. They're just decimals. Okay, we're still going to go through the same 5 steps that we went through the first time. Our first step is, are there any parentheses in that problem? And if you look, there are no parentheses. So we get to move on to the next step. The next step is, are there like terms? So we're going to look at the left-hand side of the equation. And look, that we have a 3y minus 2.4. I can't combine these because they are not alike. The 3 has a y with it and the 2.4 does not. So then we're going to look at the right-hand side of the equation and say, is there anything alike on the right-hand side? And there's not, because again, the -2 has a y and the 7.1 does not. So they are not like terms, so there's nothing for me to combine. The third step is, are there variables on both sides? So in this case, are there y's on both sides of that equation, or on both sides of the equal sign? And there are. So we're going to take the one from the right and move it to the left. You can take the one from the left and move it to the right, but I usually like to go from right to left if possible. This time we have a -2y. So to move a -2y, we're going to add 2y to both sides. When I add 2y to both sides, I have 3y plus 2y equals 5y. Minus 2.4 equals 7.1. Again, these right here cancel, so you could put a line through those. Then my next step is to add or subtract. So like Ms. Fielding was saying, our ultimate goal is to get the y by itself. So we need to look and say what's being added or subtracted from the y. And the 2.4 is being added, or is being subtracted from the y. It's minus 2.4. So we're going to do the opposite of subtracting, and we're going to add. So we're going to add 2.4 to both sides, because we always do the opposite to get rid of it, and whatever we do to one side of the equation, we must also do to the other. So here, these are going to cancel, so again, you can put a slash through those. We're going to bring down our 5y, so 5y equals 7.1 plus 2.4 gives me a 9.5. Then I'm going to multiply or divide. So I'm going to look at the y and say, is there anything being multiplied or divided? Here, the 5 is being multiplied times y, because we know if they're touching, they're being multiplied. So I'm going to do the opposite of multiply, and I'm going to divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5. Again, the 5's right here are going to cancel or mark out. So I'm going to be left with y equals 1.9, because 9.5 divided by 5 is 1.9. So we have y equals 1.9. Again, take a minute, make sure you have all of the steps written. You do not have to write the words over here on the right. You just need to have the work. We have to check. We always need to check our work to make sure that it's correct. So we're going to start with the original equation before you did anything to it. And everywhere you see a y, you're going to plug in a 1.9. So on the left-hand side, instead of y, I put in 1.9. So I'm going to say 3 times 1.9, and I get 5.7. And I'm going to subtract 2.4 and get 3.3. Now we want to see if the right side over here matches our left side. So instead of y, again, we're going to put in 1.9. So negative 2 times 1.9 plus 7.1. So when we say negative 2 times 1.9, we get negative 3.8 plus 7.1, and that gives us 3.3. And if you see, both sides have 3.3, so we are correct. Again, make sure you have the work and the check written before you move on.
All right. Don't panic because you look at number 4 and you suddenly see fractions, because that's what we tend to do. This is no different than if there was a whole number in front of the variable or touching the variable or being multiplied with the variable. We have fraction buttons in our calculators at school, and if you have a calculator at home, chances are you have a fraction button on that calculator and you can actually work these problems out with us as we go. If you look at this problem and we follow our steps, we look for parentheses. We look for like terms on either side of the problem. We don't have any parentheses. We don't see any like terms on this side of the problem. We don't see any like terms on this side of the problem. Now we do have a variable on both sides. We have a W here and a W here. In order to get those W's to be together, like I said, it doesn't really matter if you choose left or right, but for this problem, we're going to choose to move this W to be with this W, because if we were to move the 3/4 W, if we were to move the 3/4 W to the left side of the problem, then we would have nothing left over here on the right. So we want to avoid that for the time being. And we just simply have to subtract 1/2 W, because we have a positive 1/2 W on this side. We have to move it to be with the 3/4 W on the other side. And again, for the purpose of this, I would say type this in your calculator, use your fraction button, and get your answer. 3/4 W minus 1/2 W is going to give you 1/4 W. We still have this -5 over here, so we have to bring it down. We can't forget about that. All right. So now it's a pretty simple problem. We have -5 equals 1/4 W. But what do we do to get that 1/4 away from our W? We're going to multiply by the reciprocal. In order to get this W by itself, just to equal W, we'll have to cancel out this 1/4. In order to do that, we have to multiply this by the reciprocal. That means we're flipping the fraction over. So we're multiplying by 4/1, which is the exact same thing as 4. When we multiply 1/4 times 4/1, your 4's cancel and your 1's cancel, and you're left with your W. So W is now by itself. Now, because we did it on this side, we're required to do it on this side as well. So we have to multiply our -5 times 4/1. And if you want to just write that as 4, that's okay, but the way that it works in my mind, I need to see it as a fraction to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing with the reciprocal. So that's just my personal preference. It's up to you. If you get it the other way, that's fine. You multiply your 4 times -5, and you get -20. So that's done over here, and then over here we have a W left, and we have -20 equals W, and we will ask you to write this as W equals -20. It doesn't matter if I flip the problem over, as long as I don't change anything. W equals -20, W equals -20. It's the exact same answer. So now, because it's required from this point forward, we're going to look at a check. Make sure that you have this work written down on your paper, on your notes, before you move on. All right. Again, you can see the work over here has come in. That's nothing. It's just typed out instead of written in handwriting. On this side, we're going to look at our check. We have our original problem up here. And again, we're going to put in parentheses everywhere we see a W. There's our equal sign. And we're going to put in parentheses everywhere we see our W. Now, W is equal to, I shouldn't have put in W there, I should have put in parentheses. W was equal to negative 20. So we're going to put in negative 20 everywhere we have a W in our original problem. And then we're just going to work this out. 1/2 times negative 20 is negative 10. Minus 5. Over here, we have 3/4 times negative 20. That's going to give us negative 15. So we have negative 15 because negative 10 minus 5 is negative 15 equals negative 15. And that is correct, so our problem checks out. Therefore, W is in fact equal to negative 20. Make sure that you have this work and this check written down before you move on.
All right, number 5 says 8W minus 4 equals 2W. Again, we're going to go through all 5 of those steps. The first one is, are there parentheses? And there's not. The next step is, are there like terms? There are not like terms, because if I look at the left-hand side, I can't put an 8W with the 4, because again, the 8 has a W and the 4 does not. And on the right-hand side, there's only 2W, so there's nothing to combine there. The third step is, are there variables on both sides? And there are. There's a W on the left-hand side of the equal sign, and there's a W on the right-hand side of the equal sign. So we need to move the W's. And again, usually I like to go from right to left. However, if I move this 2W over, there's not going to be anything left on the right-hand side. So for this example, I'm going to take the 8W and move it to the right. Instead of going from right to left, I'm going to go from left to right. This is a positive 8W. So I'm going to do the opposite of positive, which is negative. So I'm going to subtract 8W from both sides. Again, here the 8W's are going to cancel. And I'm going to be left with negative 4 equals negative 6W. So again, my next step is to add or subtract. So I'm going to look at the W and say, is there anything being added or subtracted to the W? And there's not. So I get to move on to the multiplying or dividing. So I look at the W again and I say, is there anything being multiplied or divided with the W? And the negative 6 is being multiplied because it's right there next to it. So negative 6 times W. So to move the negative 6, I need to do the opposite of the multiply, so I'm going to divide. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 6. The 6's here are going to cancel. And negative 4 divided by negative 6 is 2 over 3. And we're going to leave that just as a fraction. Our rule with fractions and decimals is if it's a pretty decimal, meaning that it stops, you can use the decimal form. If it does not stop or it's a repeating decimal, you need to use the fraction. And again, we go ahead and write this as W equals 2 over 3. We're going to go ahead and check this. Again, you are required to check every problem. With the check, again, remember to always go back to your original problem before you did anything to it and rewrite it. And instead of the W's, we're going to put in 2 over 3 because we think that that is what W is equal to. So on the left-hand side, instead of W, I put in 2 over 3. When I multiply that times 8, I get 16 over 3. And when I subtract 4, I get 4 over 3. And again, just because it's a fraction, don't let that bother you. The calculators in the classroom have a fraction button, and if you have a calculator at home, more than likely it has a fraction button. 2W, instead of the W, we put in 2 over 3 and multiply it times 2, and again we get 4 over 3. So the left-hand side has 4 over 3, the right-hand side has 4 over 3. Since those match, we are correct. Again, please make sure that you have the work and the check written down before you move on. Not seen her.
All right, we're going to look at number 6 now. For number 6, we have parentheses all of a sudden. Now, you know parentheses is the first step because we went over that and wrote those down. First time we've seen them, the first thing I want you to do again is to draw your arrows. You can also add the opposite here so you don't get confused with your signs. And you're going to want to put a 1 in front of this A here again so you don't get confused and think that it doesn't go anywhere. All right, We distribute 2 times A, we write as 2A. 2 times negative 1, we write as plus a negative 2. We could also write as minus 2. Either way, it works. We've gotten rid of our parentheses. Let's bring the rest of our problem down. And then go from there. We don't have like terms on this side of the equal sign. We don't have like terms on this side of the equal sign, but we do have a variable on both sides. Again, you can pick a side. It doesn't matter, but you got to pick a side. So for this problem, we're going to move this negative 1A over here to be with our positive 2A. So we're going to add 1A to get this to cancel, and then we're going to add 1A over here. Now we end up with positive 3A plus a negative 2. Also written as minus 2, doesn't matter which way you write it, equals 7. Now we have numbers on both sides. Over here with our 3A, we have a negative 2. So we have to add 2 to get rid of that negative and make that equal 0. Because we did it on this side, we're required to do it on that side. Because if you do something on one side of the problem, you're required to do it on the other side of the problem. 7 plus 2 equals 9. So we're left with 3A equals 9. Our A is not by itself yet. It still has a 3 attached to it. We know when a letter and a number are touching, they're being multiplied. We know that we have to do the opposite to undo the multiplication. So because it's being multiplied, we have to divide in order to get the 3 away from the A. So we're going to divide by 3. We get rid of this 3. Because we did it on this side, we're required to do it on that side, so we have to do it over here. We bring down our A, bring down your equal sign. Sorry, my A doesn't look much like an A. Let me fix that. Bring down your A, bring down your equal sign, and then you have 9 divided by 3, which equals 3. Make sure that you have this worked down before you move on to the next slide and look at the check. Alright, you don't have to recopy the work that's over here again. It's just come in from that's where it was typed in the computer. We think here that A equals 3, and that's what we're going to check. So let's go back to our original problem over here before we did anything to it and write this out. We have 2A minus 1 equals 7 minus A. Draw your line so you have your equal sign. And on this side of the problem, we're plugging in a 3 for A. We have 2, 3 minus 1 on this side. Equal sign. We have 7 minus, our A is 3. So 7 minus 3. So we have parentheses. We can do what's in the parentheses first. 3 minus 1 equals 2. 2 times 2 equals 4. 7 minus 3 equals 4. 4 equals 4. That is a true statement, so this problem does check out. Make sure that you have your work written on your paper for your check here before you move on.
Number 7 says 19 plus 3F minus 4 equals 8 minus F plus 6. Again, we're gonna go through those 5 steps that we talked about. The first one is, are there parentheses? And in this case, there are no parentheses. The second step is like terms. So I'm going to find my equal sign and look on the left of it and say, is there anything over here that I can combine? And in this case, there is. I have a 19 minus 4, and they're just numbers with no variables, so I can put those together. And I can say 19 minus 4. Then I'm going to look at the right-hand side of the equal sign, and I have 8 minus F plus 6, and say, is there anything over here that I can combine? And there is. I can combine the 8 and the 6, because again, there is no variable attached to them. They're just numbers, so I can go ahead and combine those. So I went ahead and said 19 minus 4 and got 15, plus 3F equals 14 minus F. So this is where I'm at right now, this step right here. And I went ahead and combined like terms. So then I look and say I have variables on both sides. I have an f on the left of the equal sign. I have an f on the right of the equal sign. So we're gonna move those. I'm gonna move the one from the right to the left. And again, you might want to put a little 1 in front of that f if nothing's there. Since it's minus f, I'm going to add 1f to both sides. I'm going to add it here where there's an f, and I'm going to add it over here where there's an f. I'm going to bring down my 15 because I can't add 1f to 15 because it doesn't have an f. So 15 plus 3 plus 1, or 3f plus 1f is 4f, equals 14, because again, these f's right here are going to cancel. Then I have to add or subtract. So I'm going to look at the f and say what's being added or subtracted, the 15. It's not the 4 because the 4 is right next to the f, so it's being multiplied. It's the 15. It's a positive 15, so I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. Here the 15s are going to cancel, and I'm going to bring down my 4f. So 4f minus 14 minus 15 is negative 1. Then I'm going to multiply or divide. I have 4 times f here, so I'm going to do the opposite and divide both sides by 4. And f equals negative 0.25. And again, you could have also left that as just negative 1 over 4. I would have taken either one of those answers because it's a pretty decimal, meaning that it stops. So you can use the decimal form. Or again, like I said, you could also have left it as a fraction. That's fine as well. All right, we're not going to do the check with that one because we're running out of time. So we're going to leave the check off. So that covers our second objective. We're able to solve a linear equation with variables on both sides. Now, before we get done with the video, I want you to take this question right here, the 5n plus 6 equals 17n. And I want you to take a minute and pause the video and try this on your own. Okay? Also, you can change that 2 to a 1. Okay? Should be a 1 and not a 2. So again, take a minute, pause the video, and try this problem on your own. Once you're finished trying it, go ahead and restart the video to see the answer. You should have gotten n equals 0.5. If you didn't, go back and see if you can find your mistake. And if you can find your mistake, go back and fix it. If not, we'll answer any questions that you have tomorrow. Thank you for watching.